The millionaire mindset is not built by thinking about money all day. It is built by thinking about money correctly. You have been told that rich people obsess over money more than everyone else. That is wrong. Rich people think about money differently than everyone else. There is a significant gap between those two things. Most people think about money with anxiety, comparison, urgency, and fear. They check balances the way frightened people check a wound. They spend to calm themselves. They save to feel safe for one more hour. They chase bigger numbers because they think a larger account will finally make them feel complete. The truth is, that is not financial intelligence. That is emotional dependence, wearing the costume of responsibility. The wealthy do not approach money that way. They think about structure. They think about options. They think about what each dollar can produce, protect, or multiply. They think about systems instead of strain. They think about patience instead of panic. They think about identity instead of aspiration. This is where most people stop. They want the appearance of wealth without the architecture that creates it. They want the reward without the operating system. Not theory, lived experience. I learned this the hard way. I watched highly paid executives earn more in a month than their parents earned in a year, and still live in private chaos because they never learned how to think. Then I watched quieter people, less flashy people, less performative people, build real freedom because they made decisions from a different internal code. This audiobook is not here to show you what wealthy people own. It is here to show you how wealthy people think. Because once the thinking changes, the having stops being a fantasy and starts becoming a byproduct. Chapter 1. How the wealthy really see money. The first lie you need to kill is this: money is not emotional. You are. That distinction changes everything. When Warren Buffett talks about buying a business as if the market could close tomorrow and stay closed for 5 years, he is revealing something deeper than patience. He is revealing a relationship to money that most people never build. He is not using money to feel secure in the next 5 minutes. He is using money as a tool placed into productive assets with a clear purpose. That is a completely different mental posture. Most people do not see money as a tool. They see it as proof. Proof that they matter. Proof that they are safe. Proof that they are ahead. Proof that they are not failing. So every financial choice gets contaminated by identity pain. A purchase becomes emotional medicine. An investment becomes a test of self-worth. A bad month becomes a moral verdict. And from that point on, logic has already left the room. The truth is, money amplifies decisions. It does not heal insecurity. It does not create character. It does not replace discipline. It simply makes the consequences of your thinking larger. Behavioral economist Richard Thaler wrote about mental accounting, the way people assign emotional meanings to money, depending on where it came from and what they want it to mean. That is why someone can waste a tax refund with no pain and then panic over a grocery bill. The numbers are real, but the mind is telling stories. Wealthy people are not immune to those stories, but they work hard to strip the drama away. They train themselves to ask a colder question. What does this dollar do if I place it here instead of there? That is the first wealth filter you need. Not how much, what function. I use a simple framework for this. Tool, time, return, risk, identity. Tool means this: what job is this money meant to do? Protect, produce, purchase, learn, give. Time means this: is this decision serving today, next year, or the next decade? Return means this: what result does this allocation create, financially or structurally? Risk means this: what can go wrong, and can you absorb it? Identity means this: does this decision belong to the person you are building, or the person you are trying to outgrow? Run every serious money decision through that frame, and half your self-sabotage becomes visible. This is where most people stop. They do not want clarity. They want relief. Relief buying looks like confidence for about 10 minutes. Then the bill arrives. Relief saving also looks wise until it becomes fear-based hoarding that never learns how to grow. Relief investing looks bold until it turns into speculation with no framework. The behavior changes, but the emotional engine is the same. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed through prospect theory that people feel losses more intensely than gains. That research matters because it explains why most people grip money emotionally. Losing $1,000 hurts more than gaining $1,000 feels good. So if you have not trained your mind, you will protect money badly. You will either avoid intelligent risk or chase reckless recovery. Both come from the same weakness, emotion running analysis. I have seen this destroy people, not poor people only. Highly educated people, senior leaders, people who could explain market strategy in a conference room and then finance insecurity with a luxury lease they did not need because the car made them feel significant in a life that did not. At 35, during the final year before I burned out, I sat in my car after a quarterly review and realized I was not managing money strategically. I was using money to reward survival. Long week, spend, bad meeting, spend, need to feel in control, upgrade something. On paper it looked harmless because the income was high. In reality, it was the same emotional architecture that ruins people at every income level. I learnt this the hard way. Wealth is not blocked first by shortage. It is blocked by confusion. The wealthy reduce confusion. They define the purpose of money before the world defines it for them. Emergency reserves are for resilience. Investments are for future cash flow. Spending is for utility or true enjoyment. Giving is for values. Nothing is left vague. Vague money disappears. And here is the counterintuitive part. Rich people often think about money less often than anxious people do. Not because they are careless, because they have already done the strategic thinking. Once the system is clear, there is less emotional noise. Money moves according to design. Most people revisit money every day because there is no design, only reaction. If you want your mind to change, start small. The next time you look at your bank balance, do not ask how it makes you feel. Ask what it enables, what it protects, and what it should be doing next. You are trying to move money from the emotional category to the strategic category. That single shift is the hinge, because once money stops being your comfort, you can finally start using it for something far more powerful. You can start using it to buy back the one asset you cannot replace. Chapter 2. The time trap most people never escape. Once money becomes a tool, the next question gets brutal. What are you using it to defend? For most people, the answer is simple. They are using money to survive the consequences of selling their lives in hourly pieces. That is why so many people feel trapped, even when their income is respectable. The problem is not only how much they earn, the problem is the mental model beneath the earnings. If your core equation is time equals money, your ceiling is already built. You can work harder. You can ask for a raise. You can squeeze more effort out of your body. But the structure is still capped by the number of hours available and the level of exhaustion you can tolerate. The wealthy think differently. They ask a harsher question. What value can continue to exist after my immediate effort stops? That is how the game changes. When Jeff Bezos left Wall Street to start Amazon, he did not do it because he wanted a busier life. He did it because he saw a possibility larger than salaried effort. His regret minimization framework was not romantic. It was structural. He looked at the explosive growth of the internet and understood that building a system around a rising force could produce scale no job ever could. Limited downside, massive upside. That is value-based thinking. The truth is, many people confuse labor with worth. They think if they are tired, they are progressing. If they are packed with tasks, they are moving forward. If their calendar is full, their future must be improving. No, busyness is not a wealth strategy. Busyness is often the thing preventing one. Economic principle makes this plain. Income tied directly to labor has linear potential. Value tied to systems, assets, or scalable distribution has non-linear potential. One is bounded by personal capacity. The other can grow far beyond the operator. This is why intellectual property matters. This is why ownership matters. This is why distribution matters. This is why the wealthy obsess over leverage. A skill used once earns once. A skill turned into a system can earn repeatedly. This does not mean you quit your job tomorrow and start talking nonsense about passive income. Most people rush there too fast because they want escape, not architecture. The real shift is mental first. You start asking, for every skill you have, every experience you have, every problem you can solve, how many people could this serve without requiring me to repeat myself from zero every time? Maybe you are excellent at sales. Can that become training, consulting, or a repeatable process inside a business? Maybe you understand operations. Can that become a template, a service, a tool, or a standard others use? Maybe you know how to explain difficult things simply. That can become content, teaching, or communication assets that compound over time. This is where most people stop. They dismiss what they know because it feels ordinary to them. That is a mistake. Skills always feel common from inside your own head. The market does not pay you for what feels special. It pays you for what solves real problems. There is a second psychological trap here, present bias. Humans overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue future returns. That is why people stay trapped in pure labor models longer than they should. The paycheck arrives now. Building leverage looks uncertain and slow, but slow and strategic beats immediate and trapped. Walter Mischel became famous for research on delayed gratification. The popular version of that research got oversimplified, but one truth remains useful. The ability to tolerate delayed reward changes life outcomes. In money, that means tolerating the awkward phase where you are still earning through labor while quietly building value beyond labor. Most people cannot stand that phase. They want visible results too soon. They want certainty too soon. They want applause too soon. I learnt this the hard way as an executive. I used to think bigger compensation solved the problem. It did not. It only made the cage more expensive. Better suit, better apartment, better meals, same dependency, same fragility. If your life needs your constant presence to keep producing cash, you do not own freedom, you rent status. The wealthy do not only ask how much they can earn next month, they ask what they can build this year that still pays next year. That question changes what you study. It changes how you spend evenings. It changes what opportunities you notice. It changes how you define productivity itself. So here is your immediate move. Take 15 minutes and write a direct answer to this question. If you could no longer exchange time for income, what value could you create that would still earn after you stopped working on it today? Do not aim for brilliance. Aim for honesty. The first answer will likely be rough. Good. Rough truth is more useful than polished fantasy. Because once you stop measuring your worth by hours, another danger becomes visible. It is not only the structure of how you earn that matters. It is whether your emotions can be trusted at all when money is involved. Chapter 3. The emotional discipline that protects wealth. People do not usually lose money because they lacked access to information. They lose money because emotion hijacked timing, judgment, and behavior. Look at 2021. Meme stocks exploded. People bought businesses they could not explain because online excitement felt like intelligence. Then look at 2022. Fear took over. Many of the same people sold quality assets at the worst possible time because temporary pain felt like permanent truth. The market changed, yes, but the deeper story was older than any chart. Untrained emotion entered the room and took the wheel. Wealthy people are not calm because they are born different. They are calm because they install systems that reduce the damage emotion can do. Ray Dalio is a brutal example of this. In 1982, he made a confident macro call, got it badly wrong, and nearly wiped himself out. That moment did not teach him to trust his feelings more carefully. It taught him the opposite. He built decision structures at Bridgewater that forced ideas to be challenged, recorded, and stress-tested by other people. That was not personality. That was protection. The system existed because confidence is not evidence. The truth is, most people keep trying to solve emotional money problems with willpower. They promise themselves they will not impulse spend again. They promise themselves they will not panic sell again. They promise themselves they will research before the next big decision. Then stress hits. Social comparison hits. Excitement hits. And the promise evaporates. Willpower is not a financial system. It is an unstable fuel source. Kahneman and Tversky showed how loss aversion distorts decision-making. Neuroscience research has also shown that stress narrows cognition and increases short-term thinking. That matters because many bad financial decisions happen in compressed emotional states. A fight, a layoff scare, an exciting tip from a friend, a flash of envy after seeing someone else display success. In those moments, the mind is not searching for truth. It is searching for relief, certainty, or status. This is where most people stop. They notice the bad behavior, but they do not redesign the environment that produced it. If stress makes you spend, remove stored payment methods. If social pressure makes you overspend, lower the visibility of people who monetize your insecurity. If excitement makes you invest impulsively, create a mandatory waiting rule, 48 hours, written thesis, maximum position size. No exceptions. That is what emotional discipline actually looks like, not suppression. Architecture. There is a phrase I use for this. Never let a temporary feeling make a permanent money decision. Burn that into your mind. Another one. Excitement is not due diligence. And another. Anxiety is a terrible financial advisor. I learned this the hard way during my corporate years. The more exhausted I became, the more I confused convenience with wisdom. I paid to avoid thinking. I paid to numb friction. I paid for speed because I had lost control of my own attention. That is a financial issue, not just a lifestyle issue. When your nervous system is running hot, bad money decisions feel justified because you are purchasing emotional relief. Nobody teaches you that when the bonuses are still coming in. The wealthy learn to observe the trigger before they obey it. They ask, what state am I in right now? Stressed, inflated, embarrassed, afraid. Then they delay. Delay feels weak to impulsive people. It is not weak, it is power. Behavioral economists call this commitment architecture. You decide in a calm state what rules will govern you in a heated state. Automatic investing, scheduled transfers, cooling off periods, position limits, spending categories, predefined stop rules. These are not restrictions for the weak, they are guardrails for the wise. And here is the counterintuitive insight. A person with lower income and stronger emotional control can build more durable wealth than a person with higher income and emotional chaos. I have seen this destroy people. Salary does not protect you from yourself. Systems do. So identify your primary emotional money trigger. Not all of them. The main one. Is it stress spending? Is it fear-based avoidance? Is it ego spending? Is it hype investing? Then install one structural defense this week. Because once emotions stop overruling judgment, you become capable of something most people misunderstand completely. You become capable of taking real risk, instead of simply reacting to fear. Chapter 4. How the wealthy think about risk. Most people hear the word risk and imagine danger. Wealthy people hear the word risk and ask for numbers. That is the difference. Fear treats uncertainty as a stop sign. Intelligence treats uncertainty as something to measure. When Bezos used his regret minimization framework before leaving a high-paying job, he was not gambling blindly. He was comparing outcomes across time. Could he recover if the business failed? Yes. Could he recover from never trying at all? Maybe financially? Yes. Psychologically? No. That is a sophisticated form of risk analysis because it includes not only money, but future regret, missed exposure, and asymmetrical upside. The truth is, the wealthy do not avoid risk. They avoid unidentified risk. That is a completely different standard. In 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed under leverage and housing exposure. Many people did not truly understand. Some investors lost fortunes because they were reaching for return without fully measuring fragility. Others preserved capital or found opportunity because they had studied debt structures, liquidity, and second-order effects. Same storm, different preparation. This is where most people stop. They divide decisions into safe and unsafe because it feels simple, but simple is often inaccurate. Keeping all your money idle while inflation erodes it is not safe. Staying in a job with no skill growth is not safe. Avoiding every investment because volatility feels uncomfortable is not safe. It is familiar. Familiar is not the same as safe. Economists talk about opportunity cost for a reason. Every decision has a visible cost and an invisible cost. The visible cost of investing is potential loss. The invisible cost of never investing is the long erosion of purchasing power and missed compounding. Wealthy people look at both. The practical framework here is simple. Write down the worst case. Write down the probability. Write down whether you could recover. Write down the best case. Write down the probability. Then size the decision so that a bad outcome wounds you, but does not remove you from the game. That last part matters. Staying in the game is everything. You do not need to be fearless. You need to be durable. You do not need certainty. You need enough evidence to act intelligently. You do not need a perfect outcome. You need survivable downside and meaningful upside. Howard Marks often speaks about risk as something that matters most when you do not see it clearly. That is why wealthy thinking includes humility. The moment you feel invincible, you are usually underestimating something important. Onomandu. I learnt this the hard way in business. The biggest risks I took that paid off were not the loud ones. They were the researched ones. The times I moved after reading deeply, asking ugly questions, and accepting discomfort. The worst risks were the ones dressed up as certainty, popular opinion, fast consensus, confident rooms, expensive people saying the same thing. That is where blindness gathers. Psychology matters here too. Ambiguity aversion makes people prefer known pain over unknown possibility. That is why many stay underpaid, underdeveloped, and financially stalled for years. The uncertainty of change feels heavier than the certainty of stagnation. Wealthy people train themselves to see stagnation as a risk category, not a comfort zone. And here is the counterintuitive insight. The safest life is often the most dangerous one financially. Safe job, no assets, no leverage, no ownership, no skill expansion, no calculated experimentation. It looks responsible. It can also become a slow collapse. That does not mean reckless moves. It means informed exposure, diversification, position sizing, research, patience, recovery capacity. The wealthy treat risk like engineers, not gamblers. So pick one financial move you have been avoiding because it feels uncomfortable. Not reckless, just uncomfortable. Study it properly. Measure downside, measure upside. Ask if the discomfort comes from real danger or from unfamiliarity. Because the moment you learn to size uncertainty correctly, another question appears. If you can think clearly about risk, what exactly are you building with your energy? A pile of tasks or a machine? Chapter 5. The systems that generate wealth without you. The poor worship effort. The wealthy respect effort, then ask how to remove themselves from repeated effort. That is not laziness, that is leverage. John the 500th. Rockefeller is often quoted as saying he would rather earn a small share of 100 people's efforts than all of his own. Whether people admire him or not is beside the point. The mental model matters. He understood that wealth is not built by maximizing personal strain forever. It is built by designing structures that keep producing whether or not you are personally touching every moving part. Standard Oil was not a giant because Rockefeller worked harder every hour than every other man alive. It became a giant because systems were built around refining, transport, pricing, and distribution. He spent energy on architecture. The machine then carried scale. Most people do the opposite. They become experts at managing recurring tasks and call it progress. Inbox, calls, meetings, manual processes, repeated explanations, repeated decisions, repeated friction. Then they wonder why their income keeps requiring their presence like oxygen. The truth is, a task repeated enough times is a system begging to be built. A system can be small. Automatic transfers into investment accounts, a template that handles client onboarding, a product sold more than once, a hiring process that selects better people without your constant oversight, a library of content that keeps attracting attention, a piece of software, a distribution channel, an asset with yield. It does not need to be glamorous. It needs to reduce dependency on your constant direct action. This is where most people stop. They think system building is only for entrepreneurs with massive teams. No. System thinking starts at any income level. It starts with a question. What keeps happening that should not require fresh thought every time? That question is powerful because fresh thought is expensive. Decision fatigue is expensive. Repetition without structure is expensive. The wealthy guard cognitive bandwidth. They do not spend prime mental energy solving the same problem 60 times. There is an economic principle at work here. Marginal returns improve when a created asset can be reused, distributed, or automated. A worker paid once per hour is extracting one stream. A system owner can create many streams from one well-designed process. This applies to your finances directly. If saving relies on a monthly emotional decision, it is fragile. If investing relies on perfect mood, it is fragile. If every bill requires active judgment, it is fragile. Automation is not boring. Automation is a wealth weapon because it removes human inconsistency from repeated behaviors. I have seen executives making huge incomes live with astonishing fragility because there was no machine underneath the image. Miss a quarter, miss a contract, miss a few months of health, everything shakes. Then I have seen quieter operators with smaller public profiles build durable freedom through unglamorous systems that ran every week, no matter how they felt. I learnt this the hard way, after burnout. When my old performance identity collapsed, I had to rebuild around structures that did not require me to be in a constant state of intensity. That changed how I saw everything. The goal is not to become a more heroic mule. The goal is to become a better architect. Here are 3 lines worth keeping. If you have to touch everything, you do not own a system. If every dollar depends on your mood, your life is fragile. Freedom begins the moment repetition meets design. Your practical move is simple. Map your current income and identify which parts stop the second you stop. Then identify one repeated activity that can be automated, templated, delegated, or turned into an asset. Start there, not because one tiny system changes your life overnight, because the habit of looking for leverage changes the mind that builds wealth. And here is the counterintuitive part. More hustle often delays freedom. People pile more labor onto a broken structure instead of stepping back long enough to redesign it. That feels productive because motion is visible. But visible effort and invisible leverage are not the same thing. The wealthy choose leverage because once you start building machines instead of worshipping motion, you discover something uncomfortable. Systems do not remove failure. They expose it faster. And that is exactly why the next trait matters so much. Chapter 6. How the wealthy extract value from failure. Most people treat failure like a verdict. Wealthy people treat failure like an audit. That one difference changes the future. Look at Ray Dalio again. His bad call in 1982 did not just cost him money, it attacked his identity, publicly, brutally. But the long-term value of that failure was not emotional, it was informational. He learnt that confidence can be loud and still be wrong. He learnt that intelligent disagreement is protective. He learnt that failure only becomes fatal when ego prevents extraction of the lesson. That is what the wealthy understand. Failure is expensive education. Waste it, and you pay twice. The truth is, most people do not actually fear failure. They fear what failure says about them. That is why they avoid post-mortems. That is why they rewrite the story. That is why they blame timing, people, luck, the market, the boss, the family, the economy, anything that keeps the ego clean and the lesson buried. This is where most people stop. They process the pain, but they do not process the data. If a business attempt failed, what assumption was wrong? If an investment lost money, was the analysis weak, or was the outcome merely unfavorable despite a sound process? If a career move stalled, was the skill weak, the environment wrong, or the timing poor? Wealthy thinking separates outcome from process because both require different lessons. Annie Duke has written clearly about this problem. Good decisions can have bad outcomes. Bad decisions can have good outcomes. If you confuse the two, you learn the wrong lesson. That is disastrous financially, because randomness can reward stupidity in the short run and punish good judgment in the short run. The wealthy think over longer periods and study the process more carefully. Thomas Edison gets quoted badly, but the useful part remains. Repeated unsuccessful attempts were treated as information, not identity collapse. That is how inventors think. That is how builders think. That is how capital should think. There is also a psychological principle here. Self-serving bias makes people credit success to skill and blame failure on external forces. That bias protects self-image while sabotaging growth. The wealthy work to resist it, not perfectly, but deliberately. I learned this the hard way after my own collapse. Burnout felt personal because it was personal. But if I had stopped at emotion, I would have learnt nothing. When I reviewed that season honestly, the failure report was clear. I had confused endurance with wisdom. I had accepted compensation as proof that the structure was healthy. I had ignored signals from my body, relationships and attention because performance was still being rewarded. That failure taught me to read cost differently. Pain became data. You need a failure review process. 3 questions. What specifically failed? Which assumption was wrong? What rule changes now? Keep it that plain. What specifically failed? Which assumption was wrong? What rule changes now? That is how you turn pain into operating knowledge. Do not romanticize failure. Failure is not noble by itself. Plenty of people fail repeatedly because they keep protecting the same blind spot. Only examined failure becomes an asset. And here is the counterintuitive insight. Small failures that arrive early are often more valuable than smooth early success. Smooth early success can make you arrogant, careless, and underprepared. Small failures can build calibration before the stakes get higher. That is why some wealthy people are quietly grateful for early mistakes they once hated. One more line worth keeping. Failure does not make you poor. Refusing to study it does. So take one financial or professional mistake you still avoid looking at. Not to punish yourself, not to reopen shame, to recover the tuition you already paid. Because when you learn to extract value from loss, you become far harder to stop. And once you become harder to stop, the people and ideas around you start mattering more than ever. Chapter 7. The environment that makes or breaks wealth. You are not thinking alone. That is one of the hardest truths in money. The conversations around you, the standards around you, the habits around you, the jokes around you, the resentments around you, all of it is shaping what feels normal before you ever make a conscious financial decision. If your environment treats debt as inevitable, impulse as harmless, investing as intimidating, and ambition as suspicious, you will need unusual internal strength just to think clearly. Most people do not have that strength consistently, so they absorb the room. Andrew Carnegie understood this before he became Carnegie. As a poor young worker, he gained access to Colonel James Anderson's small lending library for working boys. Carnegie later described that access as a turning point. Why? Because books expanded his mental environment before his external conditions changed. His body was still in poverty. His mind stopped living there full-time. The truth is, your circle is not just social. It is informational. It is digital. It is conversational. It is aspirational. The content you consume, the people you follow, the complaints you normalize, the excuses you hear every week, these form the ceiling over your financial identity. This is where most people stop. They think environment only means friends. No. Environment includes what voices are renting space in your head. Behavioral science gives you social proof for this. Humans are deeply influenced by perceived norms. If everyone around you acts as if financial confusion is standard, you stop feeling urgency to rise above it. If everyone around you spends to signal importance, restraint starts to feel like deprivation instead of power. Norms are invisible until they own you. I have seen this destroy people, not because their friends were evil, because their environment made stagnation feel sensible. Every risk mocked, every ambition softened, every disciplined choice treated like obsession. Over time, people stop aiming high, not because they lack capability, but because they are tired of being the strange one in a room committed to limitation. The wealthy curate environment with precision. They choose proximity carefully. They study people whose results they respect. They put themselves in conversations where thoughtful investing is normal, where skill building is normal, where ownership is normal, where long-term strategy is normal. That does not mean you abandon everybody and become insufferable. It means you stop taking life instructions from people who have not built lives you would want to inherit. Let that line sit. Do not take life instructions from people whose results you would not want. That is not arrogance. That is discernment. Economically, environment affects opportunity flow. People hear about better jobs, partnerships, investments, and ideas through networks. Psychologically, environment affects identity range. You cannot aim naturally at outcomes you never see treated as realistic. Exposure expands possibility. I learnt this the hard way in corporate life. Some rooms made bigger thinking impossible, not because the people were stupid, but because cynicism had become their culture. Every idea met with smirking realism. Every unusual ambition was reduced to risk management and office politics. You stay in rooms like that too long, and your own edge dulls, quietly, repeatedly, until you start calling fear maturity. So do an environment audit. What financial behaviors are normal in your closest circle? What ambitions are treated as realistic? What kinds of people do you hear speak about money most often? Builders, victims, performers, complainers, teachers, speculators. Then change one input this month. One mentor, one book, one community, one smarter conversation, one less foolish voice. And here is the counterintuitive insight. You do not always need more motivation. Sometimes you need less contamination. Wealth thinking often grows faster in silence than in noisy rooms full of average habits defended with confidence. Because once your environment stops pulling you backward, another quality becomes possible. Patience, real patience, not passive waiting, strategic endurance. Chapter 8. The long game that builds everything. Compounding is boring in the beginning. That is why so few people ever benefit from it. They understand the principle. They just do not have the temperament. Charlie Munger said the big money is not in the buying and the selling, but in the waiting. That sounds simple until you try to live it. Waiting is difficult because the world rewards visible motion. Screens move, prices move, other people post wins. New strategies appear every week. Everyone looks busy. Patience begins to feel like passivity to an insecure mind. But the truth is, impatience is one of the most expensive financial traits you can carry. Look at Buffett and Munger holding Coca-Cola for decades. Look at families who bought productive real estate and held through cycles instead of constantly trading around headlines. Look at business owners who spent 10 quiet years building reputational capital before the market suddenly called them an overnight success. Wealth rarely arrives through dramatic moments alone. It grows in long stretches where almost nothing looks impressive from the outside. This is where most people stop. They quit during the invisible phase. They save for 6 months and decide it is not enough. They invest for a year and say it is too slow. They build a skill for 9 months and assume the market does not care. They start a business and expect certainty before momentum. The wealthy think differently. They understand that compounding is not only mathematical, it is psychological. Discipline compounds, reputation compounds, skill compounds, trust compounds, distribution compounds, the ability to tolerate boredom compounds. Behavioral economics gives this a clear name: hyperbolic discounting. People overvalue rewards that arrive now and undervalue larger rewards that arrive later. That is why short-term temptation crushes long-term wealth so often. The problem is not ignorance. The problem is time preference. The millionaire mindset lowers time preference. It trains you to respect delayed payoff. I learnt this the hard way because my former life rewarded speed, faster response, faster output, faster decisions, faster visibility. That conditioning is useful in some environments and poisonous in wealth building. Money often grows best when the ego is willing to be bored. That took me years to understand. Here is the heavy truth. Many people do not fail because the strategy was wrong. They fail because they could not endure the period where correct strategy still felt unrewarding. That line matters. Correct strategy can feel unrewarding for a long time, and that is exactly why it works for the few. Think about the Federal Reserve finding that only a limited share of adults can cover a modest, unexpected expense with cash. That statistic is not just about income. It is about long-term inconsistency across years. Small financial disciplines abandoned too soon. Emergency reserves interrupted by desire, crisis, or impatience. Visible comfort chosen over invisible resilience. So choose one wealth-building behavior and stop evaluating it too early. 90 days with no emotional verdict. Then 1 year if the logic is sound. Build automatic contributions. Build the skill. Build the asset. Build the brand. Build the reserve. Build the habit. Stop demanding proof before compounding has time to speak. And here is the counterintuitive insight. Frequent strategy changes are often not sophistication. They are impatience wearing expensive language. Most people do not need a better plan. They need the character to stay with a good one. The wealthy stay. They stay with quality. They stay with discipline. They stay long enough for small advantages to become unfair ones. Because the person who can protect a long horizon must first know how to protect something even more fragile. The first hour of the day, the place where direction either gets set by you or stolen from you. Chapter 9. The Millionaire Morning. Before money follows you, attention must obey you. That is why mornings matter. Most people do not lose their day at noon. They lose it in the first 10 minutes after waking. Phone in hand, notifications, messages, news, noise, comparison. Other people's priorities entering the mind before your own identity has even stood up straight. Then they wonder why their thinking feels reactive by breakfast. The wealthy protect mornings because mornings shape cognitive quality. Attention is freshest there. Willpower is less depleted there. Strategic thought is more available there. If you give that away first, you spend the rest of the day recovering from a loss you barely noticed. This is where most people stop. They think a morning structure is about optimization culture. It is not. It is about ownership. Research in decision science has shown that mental fatigue degrades judgment across the day. Roy Baumeister's work on decision fatigue became popular for a reason, even with the broader debates around ego depletion. The practical point remains. Your best decisions rarely come after hours of scattered input. They come when the mind has not yet been taxed by noise. Wealthy people understand this intuitively, even if they never use the academic language. I learnt this the hard way. During my executive years, my mornings belonged to email before they belonged to me. I called it responsibility. It was not responsibility. It was surrender. By the time I reached the office, I had already spent the cleanest part of my mind reacting. That pattern did not just damage peace. It damaged money. Bad attention creates bad decisions. Bad decisions create bad financial outcomes. The millionaire morning is simple. Silence, intention, movement. Silence means no incoming input before your own mind has taken shape. No phone, no feeds, no messages. Sit, breathe, think. Write one line if needed, but let your internal voice speak before the world starts shouting. Intention means defining the one move that matters most today, not 10 tasks. One real move, the work that strengthens income, skill, asset building, or strategic clarity. If you do not define the day will gladly define you. Movement means physical activation. Walk, stretch, push-ups, light training, anything that tells the body and mind the same message. We are online, we are under command. That is not a motivational routine. It is an identity routine. You are telling yourself, before evidence appears, I run the day. And here is the counterintuitive insight. A short, consistent morning structure beats a dramatic, perfect one every time. Most people build routines for fantasy versions of themselves, then abandon them. The wealthy build routines for real life. 20 focused minutes done daily will outproduce a 90-minute circus you cannot sustain. There is also a financial layer here. Mornings influence spending because disorganized days increase reactive behavior, more convenient spending, more emotional shortcuts, more weak decisions at night because the mind has been overdrawn since sunrise. Discipline in the first hour pays interest across the next 12. So track your first 30 minutes for 1 week. Do not report intentions, report behavior. If your mornings begin with other people's content, then other people are setting the architecture of your thought. That has to end if you want different results. Protect the morning, and you protect attention. Protect attention, and you protect judgment. Protect judgment, and you protect money. And once that pattern starts repeating, something deeper happens. The behaviors stop feeling like hacks. They start becoming proof of the person you are. Chapter 10. The identity that attracts wealth. Everything you have heard so far is easy to misunderstand as technique. It is not technique. It is identity expressed through repeated behavior. The wealthy do not only do smarter things with money. They see themselves differently, not louder, not more arrogant, not more performative, different in their internal operating code. They are people who allocate on purpose, people who think in decades, people who delay reaction, people who study risk, people who build systems, people who review failure, people who curate environment, people who protect attention. Those actions are not random. They are identity in motion. John the 500th. Rockefeller kept careful financial records from a young age, long before empire scale existed. That matters. He was practicing a way of being before the world rewarded it. He was building alignment between thought and action before external proof appeared. That is how wealth identity works. The internal standard comes first. The visible results arrive later. This is where most people stop. They wait for external evidence before they permit themselves a new identity. They say, once I earn more, I will become disciplined. Once I have savings, I will feel like an investor. Once I am successful, I will act like a builder. No, that order is backward. Identity drives behavior. Behavior creates evidence. Evidence reinforces identity. James Clear made habit language popular by saying every action is a vote for the type of person you want to become. He is right. In wealth, every calm allocation is a vote. Every automated transfer is a vote. Every morning protected is a vote. Every impulsive purchase resisted is a vote. Every long-term decision made without applause is a vote. The truth is, you are already practicing an identity with money. The only question is whether it is one that builds freedom or one that keeps confirming limitation. If you keep telling yourself you are bad with money, you will keep acting like a confused consumer. If you keep telling yourself wealth belongs to other people, you will keep protecting a lower ceiling. If you keep treating discipline like punishment, you will keep escaping it. The millionaire mindset begins when you say something quieter and harder. I am a person who allocates with purpose. I am a person who thinks beyond the week. I am a person who does not hand money to emotion. I am a person who builds systems. I am a person who studies before moving. I am a person who can wait. That is not performance. That is internal law. I learnt this the hard way because burnout stripped me of titles. Once the role was gone, I had to confront a brutal question. Who am I when the salary, office, and status no longer speak for me? The answer that rebuilt my life was not glamorous. I became a man who keeps promises to himself in private. That identity changed money because it changed every small behavior around money. Here is a framework you can carry forward. Identity, decision, repetition, evidence. Identity says who you are becoming. Decision expresses it once. Repetition hardens it. Evidence arrives later. Do not reverse that order. And here is the final counterintuitive insight. Wealth identity is not about feeling rich. It is about behaving responsibly before the reward, calmly during the growth, and humbly after the outcome. People chasing the feeling of wealth usually chase symbols. People building the identity of wealth build structures. So this week, choose one behavior from this audiobook and attach identity to it. When you delay an emotional purchase, say silently, "This is who I am." When you move money toward an asset, say, "This is who I am." When you wake and protect your first 30 minutes, say, "This is who I am." Repetition matters because the mind believes what the body practices. That is how money starts flowing toward you, not by magic, not by performance, by alignment, because once the identity is real, the decisions become cleaner. Once the decisions become cleaner, the systems become stronger. Once the systems become stronger, the results stop looking accidental. And when that happens, the world calls it wealth. You call it character. Money does not respect desire. Money respects structure. A fearful mind can earn a lot and still stay poor. A disciplined mind can start small and still build freedom. The truth is, numbers do not change character. They expose it. If money feels emotional in your hands, the work is not only financial, it is internal, it is architectural. You do not need to worship money, you need to assign it a job. You do not need more noise, you need more clarity. You do not need to look rich, you need to think cleanly. Most people want relief, very few want responsibility. This is where most people stop. They stop at the moment the fantasy ends and the work begins. They stop when patience is required. They stop when identity must replace mood. They stop when silence gets uncomfortable. They stop when discipline stops looking glamorous. But wealth has never cared about glamour. Wealth cares about repetition. Wealth cares about control. Wealth cares about delayed reward. Wealth cares about whether you can tell the truth when nobody is watching. You can lie to other people for a long time. You cannot lie to your patterns. Your patterns are your biography. Your calendar is your confession. Your bank statement is your philosophy made visible. The truth is, every purchase says something. Every delay says something. Every morning says something. Every excuse says something. Every quiet, disciplined choice says something louder than words. You are either building a life that depends on constant strain, or you are building a life with structure underneath it. You are either reacting or directing. You are either renting identity from appearances or building identity from action, not theory, lived experience. Menophy and the Nasayad Bait. I learnt this the hard way. The room that praises your income will not save you from your habits. The title that flatters your ego will not protect your future. The applause that follows success will not teach you how to keep it. Only discipline does that. Only truth does that. Only systems do that. If you want wealth, become the kind of person wealth can trust, calm under pressure, measured under temptation, patient under delay, clear under uncertainty, quiet under praise, honest under loss. That person does not need to announce anything. That person is already becoming dangerous in the best way, because the world is full of people who want the reward. It is thin on people who can carry the weight of the reward without breaking. Be one of the few. Think in systems, think in identity, then act that way long before the evidence arrives. That is how ceilings break. That is how freedom starts. That is how a mind becomes expensive. And that is how wealth stops being a dream and starts becoming a consequence.